This is Cadia open cut gold mine. I've been coming here for, well, nearly 20 years, I suppose, since the gold mine first became active, and periodically done new bodies of work. I'm really interested in mining and quarrying and climate change and all of those issues surrounding really the New South Wales landscape in particular. The working process usually starts with a trip, and I take my sketchbook and often just work with pigments I found right there, soil or ochres or coloured earth. I use ink, either my trusty fountain pen or I use a piece of stick or balsa wood just dipped into other ink.
Her practice is looking at really serious environmental issues, but she comes at it with such an intellectual perspective, and I think that is the key to looking at Mandy's practice. It's not to scare people, it's to make people think, to engage, to look at our landscape and our region.
My work's always gone back and forth between the natural environment and the industrial. You can't talk about the degradation of the environment without talking about what you want to preserve in that environment. So, I can be totally absorbed in painting a series which simply observing the really sort of simple values in natural environments, and then counterpoint that with a series like a number of the works in the Bathurst show, which are simply looking at the degradation of it. So it's the juxtaposition between the two. I was always a junior field naturalist, and I always thought I'd be a scientist, and I was much more interested in collecting insects. And my father was a scientist, and my mother's an artist, so we'd go on collecting expeditions, and Mum would be painting, Dad would be collecting. So for me it's always been very natural to look at science and art next to each other, and also look at the interrelationship between the two. I always use pigments. I don't often use tube paints. I usually make them myself. And then the working method is the same in the studio. I've got bags and bags of ochres and coloured earths and pigments which archaeologists and farmers and friends give me. And I mix those into my clear oil paint. So I do sort of loose impasto work. That's the first layer of working. And then I usually lie it down and stain it, and at that time flood on more pigment. And that kind of half destroys the work. It sounds a weird thing, but it half destroys it. So there are lots of accidental, wonderful things that happen. It runs and it blurs, and whole sections of it float away. And then when that's dry and I can put that vertical, I work back into those mistakes, as it were, or to that transformed painting, so that, you kind of got a series of blots and a series of scrapes and marks, because I'm not really keen on brush marks. I don't want the human hand so obviously in it. I don't want, sort of a mannered brush mark or anything like that. I kind of just feel like I've always been painting the same picture, really. I do, and in the same way too. I mean, technically they're sort of I'm still using the same techniques, that I used back in the 80s, really, and the same subject matter. If you look at that huge painting I did for Parliament House, the big commission, Red Ochre Cove, there it is, industry, environment, talking about Indigenous presence, using ochres, staining, using micas and gold, and then historical references. So it's still the same grab bag of material I use in everything, I've just always been really interested in texture and surface, and because I do a lot of landscape-based work, it's natural to actually want to incorporate the materiality of the land. We've come to this site here on our property because, for me, the Aboriginal scar trees that are located right through the Central West are a very clear sign of absence and presence. And this is my friend Tricia Carroll, who's a Wiradjuri auntie, and she was my mentor when I first came to the Central West. We've been working together
Yeah. Many years.
20 years maybe. Yeah, so we paint together, and there's a painting in the Bathurst show, the Haunted.
The Haunted, yeah. And
it's got the lines in it, which what do they represent, the lines in that painting?
That's the haunting, you know. You see a figure, and it's like withering, a shimmering spiritual line to depict that the spirits of the land are still with us.
It was just always a way of combining our different imagery, you know, like mine's very mimetic, it's representational or mimetic. Trish's is symbolic, and I find that really fascinating. So
with the past of the people that used to roam this land.
Yeah. I first painted Willerrawang Power Station near Lithgow, between Lithgow and Bathurst, 20 years ago. And this last work, which I've created with my son, Alexander Boynes, the artist, is about the decommissioning 20 years later of that same power station. And, you know, it quite literally, visually represents the warming of the planet. I sort of did the underpainting, Alexander came and looked at that. We've used file footage shot from a drone, which actually shows a power station, not Willerrawang. It hasn't been blown up yet. I'm waiting for the day they do blow it up, but they haven't done it yet.
In terms of how you and Alexander Boynes work together or collaborate on something like this, you work very closely. He comes, you unpaint, he looks. Yeah. Do you test out the technology, then go away, paint more?
No, I'm often painting it while he's there projecting.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so he said it's really quite funny because, you know, it'll be up and I'll be quickly putting in, you know, more white or more, you know, orange or whatever it is.
Mandy Martin is an artist who's always pushing her practice. The collaboration she's done with Alexander Boynes that feature in Homeground show an artist that is not afraid to embrace new media, new technology, and it gives her painting a sense of movement and a sense of foreboding. It's quite remarkable to see an artist who has such a trust and such a confidence in her work to be able to push those boundaries in that way.
This blast matches Willow Yellow, which is the second multimedia work in the Homeground survey, and have both worked on that simultaneously. So while Alexander's projecting it, I was painting it, and he was then tweaking his digital footage to take the mind through 24 hours of activity. So you can sort of get that sense of the continuum of mining, you know, the sort of gargantuan thing sweeping through New South Wales, sort of right from, you know, the Liverpool plains all the way to who knows. So it's the same sort of message in one sense. It's about mining and the sort of unease, I suppose, that kind of quarry vision that we all live with now.
It's quite apocalyptic, Mandy.
Yeah. In fact, this new work, this big one here, is called Four Riders. I didn't need to spell out the rest of it.
So this is looking at the Bulga open cut mine up in the Hunter Valley?
It is, yeah. It's sort of this view that goes all the way to the horizon, to the little power station up there on the horizon, and all of that lovely black soil and all of the bush up there going. I mean, they talk about offsets, but how do you offset something like that? You know, you can't. I mean, once it's gone, it's gone. And so all the people who live in Bulga, you know, they're gone too. I used to do a lot of very fine detailed drawing, but I'm getting much older and arthritic and like being much broader and looser now. I love painting, you know, because I'm totally seduced by the materials and the textures, and working on a good piece of linen with my favourite ochre pigments and so on makes me pretty happy.